Mai ki tēnei wānanga i te kaupapa ko Transport, ka nui te mihi manahau ki a koutou katoa. Welcome everyone to this Regional Transport Committee meeting, to our voting members, to our advisory members, to the public attending or watching online. Welcome to you indeed. This is a very important meeting for this committee at a very critical phase of our transport planning for the future of the region. And with that significance in mind, I'm wondering if I could call on Api to safely navigate us into the meeting with the karakia whakatau.
Mauri ora tātou. Areira ki inoi tātou. Nore kororia ki te atua. Maunga rongo ki te whenua. Te karo pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Areira hange te atua, nākau hau, ki roto ki tēnā o mātou. Taka tohongi ato wairua tapu, hei awhina, hei tohu ia mātou mahi katoa. Ara ki tō mātou nei mahi mo tēnei kauni hera o te Mataua Māui. Ara ki te kaupapa waka kotahi. Areira hi inoi ana mātou i runga tingo te matua, te tama, me te wairua tapu. Areira, tātou katoa, all of us. Whakataka te hau ki te tōna, whakataka te hau ki te huru. Mā kina ki uta, mā taratara ki tai, he aki ana te atukura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei moriora.
Tēnā koe te kai karakia Api. Do we have, noting that there are some people still to join us, do we have any? Councillor Van Blake, thank you. We've only just started, so
apologies.
We've had the karakia, thank you, courtesy of Api, and so we're safe to proceed. Do we have any apologies for the meeting that people wish to bring to the table?
Did we hear Wairoa Mayor as an apology, or was he trying to find him?
What's the situation up in Wairoa?
I'm just trying to get a hold of the mayor now on the phone, so
all right.
Yes. Thank you.
I don't think we need to. Should we just? I'll move an apology for lateness for his worship, and hopefully he can join us as soon as possible. Just to put that on the record. Any seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Taylor. All in favour? Right. Well, look, housekeeping. I think you know the drill by now, but this meeting is being live streamed on Council's Facebook page and recorded for viewing at a later date on our YouTube channel, and no doubt it'll be one of the, it'll go viral. In an earthquake, drop, cover and hold if the shaking is long or strong. When the shaking subsides, you leave the building through the nearest exit and proceed towards Napier Hill along Dalton Street, up through Tiffin Park, up to Cameron Road. And if emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building again through the nearest exit, which you can see there, and we assemble in the grassed area on the corner, excuse me, of Dalton and Votia Streets. And Wharepaku are down the hall in their usual place, just to straight through the doors and then turn right.
You want to welcome Matt Radford from Fox.
I would love to welcome Matt Radford, who was a new face to me, and I apologise, I mistook you for Rob. So, Matt, welcome to our midst, and thank you for being here. So you're
replacing Bridget.
You're replacing Bridget for today, or for this?
Just for today.
Okay, thank you very much. Where are we? So, do we have any conflict of interest declarations? All right. You should have in your agenda papers access to the minutes of the 3 November 2023 meeting, which is quite some time ago now. Is anyone, that's the meeting at which we really discussed the prioritisation of the 10 major capital projects, amongst other things, and approved those for inclusion in this plan. Would anyone be prepared to move those minutes are a true and correct record? Welcome, Mayor Sandra. Come and join us, please. Thank you for being here. And we've got Councillor Kerr online. You've been promoted to Central Hawke's Bay.
We will,
Lovely.
we will,
Proud
we
to
will
do
upgrade you shortly.
Yes, please.
All right, where was I?
Minutes, yeah.
Could someone please move the minutes of true and correct record? Councillor Van Bay, can you have a second? Councillor Price, thank you very much. All in favour?
All right.
Again? Carries. All right, the follow-ups, I don't think that they were particularly substantive. There were. Let's get into the right page of the minutes. Bryce, the first one's on you. Tag to carry out prioritisation ranking for future form and function review. And the, well, you can see what it says there, State Highway Paki Paki to Napier median barrier projects. Can you give an update on that?
Yes, Chair, those were completed very soon after the meeting, and as you'll see in the consultation document and the draft RLTP, they are in the Capital Works program.
Thank you. Okay. And then information provided to the council regarding the trial of Central Hawke's Bay public transport services to be provided to the council. An update on that, perhaps, Mark.
Through you, Chair. We have held another meeting with the CHB, and at this point we are still progressing the detail to support that, identifying the need to seek public feedback around what they require as far as services from that region. And then we will decide what timeframe we can wrap around that from a trial, etc. So still work in progress, but not much more to report.
Any comment on that? I do want to come back to public transport and some of our funding challenges later in the meeting. But are we happy with that explanation for now to move on and approve the, what do we do, just receive the follow-ups or?
Yes, we just need to receive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Sorry,
I'll
Mr.
second.
Chair, just had a
Oh, you did have it, you weren't moving, okay, all right.
So the staff have said that they were waiting for timeframe for funding. It was mid-year before we would know whether the funding was there. We don't believe that we're waiting for community consultation or seeking feedback at this stage. If you could clear that up with their staff, that would be great.
Sure. We are still working through, from a funding perspective, what that means is one of the key drivers. But obviously to put together a plan, we need to understand what the requirements are from the region around the service offering, to whether there is multiple services. So the two do go hand in hand.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is that is that us, CHBDC, finding out that information, or HBRC finding out that information?
That was CHB finding that information out based on the last meeting.
Thank you, and that's a mid-year for funding.
It was, sorry? Yeah, it could be through NLTF, but just how we're going to fund that is still work in progress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sean, did you want to say anything about that? I can see you listening intently.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it was a great meeting with Bryce and Mark, and we will progress this. I think we're all waiting on the funding contribution or the funding decisions from NZTA, so that has a lot to do with the timing of when we can get this trial underway. But in the background, knowing that we're hoping that we're going to get good funding, we'll be progressing our plans from a local perspective as to how we can reach out and grab the most people and the correct people who would use the trial, and then feed that back through to Bryce and Mark.
Thank you. And please do hold that thought and come back to it when we get to public transport, because there's quite an important conversation we need to have around that in light of the government policy statement, amongst other things. Thank you. Well, I'll move that we receive the follow-ups if I didn't already, or someone else did.
Second.
And Councillor Taylor seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? All right, well, that's carried. So we now move to our first and most substantive only decision item, the Regional Land Transport Plan adoption for consultation. If you could forgive me for leaning on a transport analogy, it's been a very significant, long, windy journey to this point, and we're not quite yet at the starting line, the all-important, most important consultation with our communities is about to commence. I would like to ask perhaps Bryce and or Mark to speak to this paper. We've obviously got it in front of us, but to perhaps give some context to questions, and then we'll move into discussion around the decision item before making any motions regarding it.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I mean, I'll assume that the paper and the consultation doc and the executive summary have probably been read, but the actual plan itself is still reasonably substantial. It is a lot slimmer from the previous iteration we saw in November, and a lot has become clearer in that time. I think the key things to note with where we've landed with this regional land transport plan is that it is very strongly focused on maintenance, rebuild, resilience, and creating some genuine transport choice for our region. And importantly, the proposed investment program shows that quite clearly. What we have in front of us is a $5.5 billion program across local roads, state highways over the next 10 years. Now, it is really quite important to note in that investment program section that some of those investments are only split over 24 to 27, so the next National Land Transport Fund period. Those are things like our maintenance and operations, our low-cost, low-risk programs and our public transport. A lot of the proposed state highway programs of work will naturally have a much longer period. And so the costs that are in there, the estimated costs that are in there, are the whole of project cost at a point in time. And that is what I've been able to pull out of the system. Now, those may change. We now have a really dynamic environment where we're about to go out for consultation on this, and there's a draft government policy statement on land transport also out for consultation. However, from a timing perspective, it could all line up quite well, as the consultation for this plan closes 2 weeks after the consultation on the GPS. So what that means is it gives us the opportunity to build in any changes at the back end of this process. So I guess the really important thing for the committee to remember is that this draft is a snapshot in time.
Yes.
And some of that may change, and some of the content in there may change once the consultation process closes, and in fact it's highly likely that it will. But I guess the other big part of this plan is that, in essence, the overall direction and intent of it is unlikely to change for the next decade. We have a very, very long road ahead of us with rebuild, and I think what we're going to see is maintenance, operations and those sorts of programs get updated with every cycle, but I think broadly our capital works program will stay the same for quite a period of time. And in the drafting of this RLTP, that was kind of one of the foundational threads of it, is that this is sort of us for the next 10 years, and this is what we need to do, and this is what we need to look at. So I think that's sort of the bones of where this RLTP is at, and what we're looking at. It is also important for the committee to note that because we have such a short period between today and consultation starting on Monday, we have an excruciatingly limited window to make any changes. So the consultation document at this point in time is what it is. That's locked in, it's with the printers, it's up on the web ready to go. We have the opportunity to make a few small changes in the RLTP document today. But otherwise, I would encourage you to of course note that it is a draft at a point in time. There's plenty of opportunity to build things in 4 to 6 weeks' time once consultation closes and we move into the hearings process. I guess the other one important thing to note with going back to the investment program again is the way that the investment program has been formed up is around our core transport priorities. So we have those 3 transport priorities: resilience, security, and asset management. Effectively transport choice and keeping our people safe. And so you'll see when you start going through that has sort of been split out into its contingent parts. So we're talking about maintaining what we have, really focusing on business as usual activities and doing them well. We're talking about enhancing the roadie network that we have where we can and when we can. We're talking about creating genuine and efficient transport choices for our communities to get around and decongest corridors. So that's where we have our public transport infrastructure and our active transport infrastructure and supporting services investments in there. And we're talking about strengthening the link between our 2 main urban areas. So that's really that State Highway 4 laning. And then the big bulk of it is in securing resilient and reliable journeys into, out of and around our region. And that broadly is a lot of the work that's going to be carried out on the state highways. So I think those are sort of the real summary things top of mind. The executive summary does provide a good snapshot of this whole document, seeking to effectively tell the story in a couple or 3 pages. So I'll just, I guess, open the floor for questions.
Just
Yes. No.
Just through you, Chair, just to reinforce what Bryce is saying, when the draft GPS came out, we were very comfortable that the content of what was in our plan aligned pretty well with what the government was seeking. Probably the only disconnect was around a draft suggestion of reduced funding in public transport, where we had a step change in that space. But primarily, most of the activities that we had focused aligned extremely well.
All right. Committee members, I'm going to go around the room and ask for any questions before, and just if we can keep this sort of bit to questions, to find out information from the staff or things you're confused about around the wording. Issues arising out of that, and then we'll go around the table and have comments and discussion, if that's okay. So, Api, we'll start with you.
Yes, kia ora, Martin. Yeah, Bryce, tēnā koe. No, I'm happy with what you've just explained to us, and no, it's a no-brainer what you suggested and what your committee has suggested to us, and so I'm happy. For iwi Māori, we need to be reassured that there will be things happening for our areas, wherever our concerns are, and so I'll be just keeping an eye out for that. So kia ora.
Councillor Van.
Yeah, I've got a question. It's an enormous document, enormous amount of work, and really appreciate it all. And I have a comment later about the document itself, but first of all, my question was, I can see, reading through the document, that it's a lot to do with how we saw the world prior to the election. How much of this will be affected by a national policy statement that is different from what we have now? Can you see much change in that?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the feedback. To be quite frank, no, I don't think it's going to massively impact us. We may potentially see some changes in, as Mark spoke about, public transport and potentially some active transport as well. But if we look broadly and also specifically at this draft RLTP and then overlay that with where this draft GPS is, we're really looking at economic growth and productivity a very strong focus on maintenance. There's safety elements in there, and we have all of that, and we have it in spades. And importantly, a lot of that is really strongly reflected in our proposed investment program as well. So I'm confident and comfortable that we won't see too many changes. I suspect there will be some, but I do not think that we will get into a situation where we madly have to rewrite this at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Chair. I had a couple of questions about, a question about whether we could make minor corrections or additions to the main body of the plan. In light of a couple of errors, and one, I'm not sure why it's not reflected in the plan. I can go, they're short, if you'd like me to mention them. I have.
Yeah, sure.
But my question is, can we? And I already know your answer is yes, hopefully. Minor. So we had, just in looking through it, literally just sent him the email. I should have opened it. Send. So we had just one with, when it talked about Central Hawke's Bay, it mentioned the townships. It just missed out Purongaho. So we want that put back in. And we also had one of the tables on page 70 didn't reflect that Central Hawke's Bay had $50 million worth of damage prior to Cyclone Gabrielle. And we felt that that's a big part of our story, the fact that we've got that element of BAU damage on top of recovery. There was one other minor change I won't go through, and the other one, page 32, it listed some of the daily traffic counts onto the expressway, and the first one from the south was Omahu Road. And we would like to see one added. I believe there may be a traffic count from Pakipaki, and we would like that added in to reflect the freight that is coming from the south on State Highway 2 and 50.
Good.
So minor, but we'd appreciate them. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, happy to make those additions.
Quick comment, we use it in our industry. We think of Cyclone Gabrielle, but in the case of Central Hawke's Bay and some of the roads from Hastings, HDC and Napier as well, the cyclone actually didn't happen on the 14th. It already started in June, July the previous year. You know, we had a real torrid time, and then the cyclone on top of it. So just for your information, that's how we see it.
Through you, Chair, if I may, you may recall, Councillor Van Beek, I came to this job from T&G from 5 years in the horticulture industry. So I've actually, I cannot remember if it's in the version that you've sent or if it was one of the appendices that I wanted to include later, but there is a horticulture sector impacts case study in there.
Saw that, yeah.
Yeah, and so that sort of seeks to tell that story. It is done mainly through the lens of the cyclone. However, I am, of course, very aware that, you know, this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of growers, and has probably really hampered confidence. And that was sort of a point that I tried to weave throughout that case study. So
that's the point you're trying to make.
Yeah,
I think it's a fair point too, and I think from Wairua, I remember going up on that meeting we had a year before the cyclone, and the roading network up there was just pulverised, as was Central Hawke's Bay. So it is indeed an important part of our backstory.
Through you, Mr Chair, it also reflects the dollar figures. Like when we're quoting damage, we've got recovery, we've got BAU, we've got cyclone, various, so it helps if they're aligned through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mayor Sandra, I know we've got you and Councillor Kerr here.
Well, I think that I would hand over to Deputy Mayor Tania Kerr if she's available. Because she's been all over this.
That's right.
But I just want to make an opening comment through you, Chair. And I want to congratulate the team and the enormity of this work. We've seen the aspirations and change through the draft GPS and the government and how quickly they are working and moving in 90-day cycles. It starts with a plan, and we're going to have a robust plan that we can present. We meet with the Prime Minister on the 3rd of April. This is absolutely incredible piece of work, and I'm really and it reflects very much the economic productivity of our region and the importance of that, and also the importance, of how we rebuild and recover. So I think that it reflects very well, and I acknowledge the work that's gone into this work, Bryce and Martin, and I'll hand over now to the Deputy Mayor, who's been across the detail of working the plan.
Thank you for those comments, Mayor Sandra, that's much appreciated. And yes, Councillor Kerr.
She's still there.
Well, she's got a hand up, and I suspect she's furiously trying to find her microphone button.
Yep.
Be my pick.
An additional challenge. Kia ora, everybody. I'm currently sitting on.
Hold on a second, Tanya, if you just.
She can speak again, there should be the volume.
Probably start again, please. You're a bit low in volume. Go.
Kia ora, everybody. I'm currently sitting on the Picton Ferry. I'm not sure how good the coverage is. So just checking, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of transport. Great, I've been able to hear everyone speaking clearly.
Really?
Support comments made to date. As I've gone through this, I've looked to see what is missing. Right. Because if we don't have the project, the plan, the scheme within the plan now, we're not going to get it in the next 10 years. I've spent the last 2 weeks traipsing around the South Island. I've done nearly 3,000 to 4,000 kilometres, and I feel we have very much let our communities down with the state of our local roads and our state highways. I still have not come across a road that is as poorly maintained as State Highway 2 and State Highway 5 north out of Hastings and Napier. I think that's my overriding comment, and it's great to see that is very clearly addressed in the full document and highlighted within the executive summary. So thank you, Bryce, for your incredible hard work and your team. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any questions, Tanya, or are you happy for me to move on?
I do have one question, and that is, regarding engagement with Māori. As this plan has been built, I felt it has been missing. Very interested in hearing comments about how we are going to consult specifically with Māori.
Right.
Through you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for previously raising that point too, Councillor Kerr. So Katrina and I presented the, not the draft plan, but the overall RLTP process and such to the Māori Committee on the 6th of March meeting, was it, Api? I believe. And at that meeting, there was a substantial amount of interest in the plan, and the resolution from that was for me to work with the Māori Committee to set up a range of Teams meetings or Teams huis or possibly in-person ones with all of the interested iwi tai whenua right around the region, give them a very good briefing on what the plan is, what it does, and why it's important, with a view to each one of them either submitting on the plan or having some level of involvement or input during the consultation period. So those sorts of plans are in flight at the moment, or the planning for those meetings and those briefings, and so that will be happening during the consultation period.
Thank you.
Would it be possible at all, Bryce, to, just thinking out loud, provide a copy of the plan directly to each of our Māori Committee representatives?
Yes, that would be
to take out and engage with their, at marae or upper level as they see fit, and assure them that you're around to answer any questions that surface, just to really excite some engagement and to ensure that they do get involved in the process. Possible?
Yes, absolutely.
It's an action item.
All right. Councillor Kerr, did you have another question?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair, through you. With regard to the expressway for Leyland, I see that the scoring has been come out, and my question is, would we get a higher scoring, essentially a higher benefit cost ratio, if we were to reduce the length of the 4-laner? So instead of the Pakipaki,
Okay.
I think you got the gist of the question. We lost you a little bit there, Tanya. With a shorter route, would you get a higher BC?
Through you, Chair, I guess the short answer is not entirely sure, but I guess the pragmatic answer is that right now, this is as a proposed project in a regional land transport plan. All of the detail of what the form and function of that route will be once or slightly before shovels actually start breaking ground is done after the project's locked in and the funding's locked in. So you go through a point of entry document that sets out the form and function. A business case process is then undertaken to look at the options. So that sort of a stage would be where we would start looking at those sorts of detailed options.
Well, I mean, it's in there as one of our top priority projects. It's in the bid.
Yes.
And I guess Councillor Kerr's question is in part, how do we stay involved in shaping and sizing and purposing that investment from this point to give it the best chance of getting across the line?
Through you, Chair.
Maybe Linda can help.
Yes. He's smiling.
We need to.
I'm happy to chip in. I am noting that the GPS is still in draft, but it does clearly reference and signal it as part of the RON's programme of work. I think all that we can do is as a committee to signify our support for that is critical. I'm fairly comfortable with what Bryce has outlined in terms of the current stage and the scoring of it. I think the reassurance that we could give the committee is once the draft GPS is then finalised and we then, I'm presuming that there'll be no substantive changes for the 4-laning of the expressway, that's when we would move to work together in a very similar way as we do with all large-scale capital projects in partnering with yourselves as well as Māori iwi community to develop that. So just some reassurance that while the government is certainly indicating that collectively we need to move at pace, consider value for money and move efficiently as possible through these large-scale projects, it will still be done in partnership with you. So you'll still have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I'd just like to acknowledge and welcome Mayor Little. Thank you for being with us. We know you're a busy and, hugely challenged Mayor up there in Wairoa, so thank you for being here today. What we're doing at the moment is we're just going around the table asking questions about the decision item on the Regional Land Transport Plan. We've been briefed by Bryce and Mark to the effect that the focus and priority is very much on recovery, resilience, rebuilding our state highway and rural road network, and essentially sustaining economic output in line with the latest priorities of the government policy statement. I was going to go to Councillor Price, but I'm happy to ask you if you wanted to ask any questions about that now before I do, or make any comment.
No, that'd be good. Do you want me to comment on the overall LTP?
I'll tell you what, just hold that. We might come back to comments in a moment.
Okay.
Just dealing with some questions now, and then we can have some discussion. Councillor Price, do you have any questions? And we'll come back.
No, I haven't got a question. No. Okay. Discussion, yes.
All right. We'll go to some of our advisory members. Do we have any questions from advisory members about the content of the document? We will be talking about it in substantive terms, in terms of discussion, shortly. But yeah, now's your chance. David.
Just really wanting to thank Bryce for all the hard work. We did have the opportunity to make some comments, and he's very well covered all the concerns and comments that we have made, particularly Good to see the focus on maintenance and replacement, particularly the replacement bit, because I think the asset's been sweated as far as it can go. And also interesting to note that 82% of our roads are actually rural. So thank you for that, Bryce.
All right, Angela.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, Ian.
No, I have no questions. Thanks, Martin.
All right, well, I just had a couple of questions, but before I do that, no, I'll just quickly get these and I'll come back to you, Mayor Little. I just noticed, and it's possibly a general point, is there any opportunity to better align the text of our consultation document with the text of the RLTP itself? I'll give you a couple of examples. The top, and you tipped me off this before with the reference to the form and function review, that's now sitting as project ranked number 2 on the scoring in the consultation document page something. But if you go to page 64, the table there doesn't include that and has the projects in a slightly different order. There are also some differences between the way the priorities on page possibly 8 are worded, and those priorities are worded in the document themselves on page 659. And I think it's really important if I'm being consulted on something, that if I see some wording there and it says that I am resilience, security and asset management, that when I go to the document it doesn't say resilience, connectivity, access and security. They need to match. Is that possible?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for picking up on the project prioritisation. I realised that it is there in the table, the scoring is right, but I just hadn't put them in the right way in the actual document, so I'll make that change. As for the wording, we can see, for example, that I had changed it somewhere, so that resilience, security and asset management, for example, could potentially have been a previous iteration of it, but those were in the objectives and in the policy supporting them. So the answer to that is yes, we can make those changes in the document, in the RLTP itself. The consultation document, for all intents and purposes, is locked in. I believe it's already been sent off to the printers.
Well, there's a problem there because the numbers in it are wrong, quite significantly wrong. There's a 35 million it says for active transport, and this plan says 21 million. So that's okay if the transport plan's wrong, but if the consultations document's wrong, we can't consult on something that's $14 million out.
Let me just check that one.
So, I mean, I'm just trying to assume that I'm a member of the public, and I'm going, oh, what are they doing about active transport? Oh, they're spending 35 million. Okay, I'll go to page 37. Well, it's not. It's actually page something else, and it says 21 million. I'm going to start getting grumpy. So I just think, I know someone has said this consultation document is locked and loaded. There is actually something more important than that, and that's ensuring that our public aren't confused and what we represent in the consultation document is actually correct.
Yes, no, you're right.
So I do think there needs to be an audit over the weekend around some of those issues. That's really what I wanted to raise now. All right, so I'll talk to you about that after the meeting. Okay, Mayor Little.
4.5. We'll stick with that, 34.5.
Yeah, we'll stick with that.
Yeah.
Change it.
Yeah, hey, look, been through it a little bit. I'm sorry, it's a bit late. I was just at a farewell. It's just, look, talking about the figures and that, probably the stuff on the Murupara to Wairua is really light. That wouldn't even get Sarsiel to the Mayor's house. So we probably need to look at that because that figure's well out. We had 26 mil, I think, and that gave it to anyway. So that's miles out. The overall plan's good, but I think we really, if we're going to do a regional plan, yeah, state highways, you know, all those projects are absolutely important. But man, we've got a lot of work. You know, if we want to get back to better or resilient of what we were, we're probably looking up to 200 million total spend or more. So we probably need to drill down also into the local authorities a bit more in our plan. So we know what's ahead of us too, because obviously money spent there will affect the overall money that NZTA can spend.
Thank you. I'm wondering that might be an issue that the staff could consult with Hira and ensure that what you're requesting there comes through maybe in the submission process, to ensure that those figures are correct if we can't deal with that over the weekend. Well, I really wanted to make sure this is fit for purpose for consultation, but if we haven't accurately reflected what's going on in Wairoa and your costs and challenges, then we need to correct that through the process as well. Thank you, me little. So if there's no further questions, I just wanted to make some observations, and then any further comments can come. I mean, just again, the huge amount of work. Our first meeting on this was in November 2022, and we were talking about really getting up in the helicopter, and we were talking about the need for resilience and how critical our lifelines were way back then. And that really fed off the experience I think we'd had in Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa, and no doubt in Hastings, well before Cyclone Gabriel, after 2 years of rain. I'm sorry, Linda, did you have a question? I missed you. I'll come back and I'll start my ramble again in a minute. Linda, your question.
Thank you, Chair. It should be short and sweet, but firstly, I did just want to recognise the huge amount of work of all of our teams and the Regional Council officers. Also, as well, the exec summary is the shorter version is really well done, especially the normal, simple, plain English language that's been used. And also as well, just noting and reinforcing that this is a plan for the region that should stand test of time over the next 10 years. So I feel like it's really fit for purpose. I do just have one question on page 9 of the short version. I think you did mention it in your intro, Bryce, but I just didn't quite catch it. There's a proposed investment programme at a glance, and there's a number of 4.6 billion there. Can I just confirm where that number has come from and that it's for a 10-year period? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Linda, that number has come out of Transport Investment Online, and that has been validated with our principal investment advisor. So again, that's that snapshot in time based on the numbers that I have and I have available to me today. And the state highway stuff is across a 10-year period. So you'll see in the investment program in Chapter 7, each one of the big bucket projects have a timeline on them. And so like the Hawke's Bay Strategic Resilience Rebuild, for example, is 24 to 32, I believe. So I've split it out like that. So those are long-term ones, yes.
Just supplementary, so it does include local road as well?
No, the local road is the 887 million.
It might just need the wording tidied up then, because underneath it says mostly across the state highway network, so that's my confusion. Sorry, Bryce. I was wondering what else if it wasn't state highway. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr did have her hand up, but it's now down. Anyone else on the screen? Questions before I move back to my comments? She's got it back up again.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. My question is not related specifically to the RLTP, but a question I would like answered. Can we start our form and function review straight away and not wait? It's such an important piece of work. If that can be answered at some point during the meeting, that would be appreciated.
That was good. Good question too, thank you.
It is, through you, Chair. I would love to, but funding is constrained. The reality is it's an initiative that's in this RLTP, and we won't know to what extent we've secured funding for all our initiatives until the National Land Transport Plan is developed and adopted sometime after the 1st of September.
Right. And what's the cost tag on the form and function review?
I believe the form and function review itself, as in the sort of high-level initial one, is, off the top of my head, somewhere between 200 and 400,000, and then the detailed business case sitting behind that is around $1 million, I believe.
Okay. Goodness, got a lot of buses to that. Now, okay, back to where I was. Yeah, I know.
You could ask the question out loud.
Oh, through you, Chair. Why is it so expensive? Is it years of work or?
Through you, Chair. I'm sorry, Mayor Hazelhurst, I don't actually know why. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I can come back to you
Perhaps
on
there's
that.
a follow-up there.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
I mean, it may be money incredibly well spent if it avoids wasting $100 million on something, but it's a fair question.
Well, through you, Chair, just a question really to Linda. Is this something that Waka Kotahi shares in a review such as this?
Sorry, what was the question, Mayor Hazelhurst? I didn't quite catch that. Waka Kotahi shares.
It's a form and function review.
Yep.
And to undertake such a business case would be about $1 million, but to do the initial work in preparation would be between 200 and 400,000. My question is this something that is shared by Waka Kotahi to undertake this work?
Yeah, I think the preparatory work, I'm not sure whether that's the point of entry or the initial single stage and then into the full form and function review. But yes, there would be funding from, as I understand it, each of the councils, as well as a contribution from the National Land Transport Fund.
Okay, well, that's really helpful.
That's partly what we're seeking through this, of course. So, all right.
So through you, Chair, it's not just the regional council,
No.
LTP is what we're hearing.
Yes. No.
So we're hearing that the opportunity, there is a collective funding model, and so it's understanding, taking that collective funding model and progressing that in a timely way,
Yes.
rather than waiting for, So I'll need to understand in both our LTPs and that their provision has been made and Waka Kotahi. So who has that wider funding conversation of that joined up collective approach?
Yeah, well, I can't answer that question as to the allocation of funding. I mean, I thought we were submitting a bid for funding for that project within here, and I'm not sure what our commitment ratio would need to be to that.
Through you, Chair, I naturally assume, not sort of knowing otherwise, that it would be at usual funding assistance rates. I don't know that for a fact. That's just the working assumption with any of these sorts of investments. So as far as I understand it, as Linda has pointed out, it will be a joint project, cost share. So then there will be an element of obviously this going through the RLTP to attract some National Land Transport Fund, as well as it being present in LTPs to attract the local share. And then the actual project itself will be collaboratively carried out, is my understanding.
But isn't it the case that anything we've put in here, good afternoon, Katrina, and welcome, anything we've put in here is something that we reasonably assured our commitment to is available?
Yes. So there has to be, any projects that go into the RLTP, they have to have a financial commitment. So there has to be the funding available for them.
From
local share and...
For local share?
Yes, correct, for local share.
So we could assume then that the TAG staff have costed through the detail of this plan what our commitments would be and that they would be aligning with our long-term plans, is that?
So my understanding of how all of that is, the short answer is yes. So in conversation with our investment advisors, they have said, put some money in for this initiative into your LTP, and so it should be present in LTPs.
I think that needs to be clarified vis-a-vis the form and function review in particular, because it's a little bit different than, say, a roundabout or intersection or some of the other capital projects. All right, look, can I just go back to where I was? I think, acknowledging the huge amount of work. Obviously, this entire plan is strongly founded in the impacts of Cyclone Gabriel and everything that preceded it, and the need to ensure that both our state highway and rural network is resilient, repaired, and built back better. This is the common terminology to enable our economy to thrive, our people to be safe, and their lives and livelihoods secure. I think there's an equally strong alignment, you'll see I'm reading some notes that I scribbled down, between this core focus of the plan and the core focus of the new GPS, which was touched on before, which is economic growth and productivity, increased maintenance and resilience, and safety and value for money. I really think that resonates incredibly well, and we anticipated that well. Equally, I think the GPS reflects that we're in the age of adaptation quite strongly and needing to catch up on quite serious and chronic underinvestment across the transport network in the whole country. I mean, this is a plan at a scale of funding bid that we probably never as a region before imagined or even dared to put in. You know, you've got a $5.5 billion program of works here, including the Transport Agency resilience projects for Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti. We've had huge support from Wellington, both sides of the election. We've had several $100 million come into this region for repairs to date. We've had recently and repeated commitments from the newly elected government to ensure that we get back on our feet and do everything they can to support that. One of the most profound challenges, of course, is going to be the need for an enhanced FAR rate to have any prospect of delivering on the, I understand, close to $1 billion deficit in funding between what the local authorities can commit to at 51% and what is required. And the RLTP highlights that in as many words at section 3.6. So that's going to be an ongoing and enduring challenge, and we just need to keep banging that drum until, you know, if it takes a decade, we ultimately get there. So that's the good news. I just want to share a challenge, I guess, of this plan to Wellington, and this isn't a conflict between our plan and the GPS. This is a domain where our plan goes further and adds an adjunct, if you like, to the GPS priorities that I've just outlined. And that is really the challenges that Wellington, we implore you through our plan, I guess, through this bid, to consider these roading investments in the context of our wider transport system. You know, I think personally, and these are my personal views, it's a false economy to invest in roading in isolation without considering the health benefits, for example, of active transport and the benefits to our health system in terms of reduced costs and pressures on that system over a 30-year period. If you look at section 2.4.1 of the plan, you know, Hawke's Bay has got some absolutely terrible health parameters around physical activity, rates of participation in active transport, health impacts of transport-related air pollution, hospitalisations, highest as you read down that table, and the acknowledged benefits of active transport. If you were to factor those in, it can make a big difference. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on is the emissions reduction, reduced congestion, reduced maintenance benefits, indeed economic benefits of public transport. And if you'll forgive me, the wasted additional cost in trying to retrofit if you just build like a 4-lane expressway or a new bridge without thinking about active transport or public transport and where that fits in from a system perspective, it's a false economy to then go and try and retrofit that at the end of the day. So I guess in that context, I did read, and I'm building to a point where I think this committee should celebrate its plan and acknowledge the synergies and resonance with the GPS and this government's ambition, but challenge it through a submission to consider all of this from the perspective of the transport system. There's a part of the plan that really troubled me, well, some great deal, is page 25, where the government expects that funding in the roading activity class will not be able to be used to make multimodal improvements. Cycleways, busways, traffic calming, and I know that that's raised an issue for Waipala specifically. And we've got policies in here which I'm particularly wedded to, which we've all agreed on, that building back better means that we ensure new and replaced assets deliver a multimodal transport system. That's policy 1.2. And we're looking at investing in active transport options, and in fact, active transport networks and corridors between the two major cities, and disincentivising parking to get people out of their cars onto the safe active transport roads that we would build, and onto the bus. So I think that gives us an opportunity to say, look, fantastic GPS, thank you for your support, but don't forget this part of the system. This region hasn't forgot that part of the system. We're committed to it, and we look forward to opportunities to partner with government in delivering that stuff. What happens, you'll recall we had a multimodal expressway bid last time, and it failed because the activity class for walking and cycling was too small. And so if we can't draw on the walking and cycling activity class, because it's now at the level it is under this GPS, and we can't use roading activity class for multimodal, we might fall between two stools and it will never happen. That's my concern. And finally, the assumption that we can, as to public transport, as this document suggests, it expects greater fare box recovery. Well, the problem is, if, as we've just had to do, or are proposing to do, we increase bus fares, patronage could decline, and it actually becomes a vicious cycle the other way. So, yeah, those are my thoughts, just that we perhaps encourage through a submission from this committee, firstly, acknowledging the huge degree of resonance and the focus on our roading network, on resilience, on recovery, is the absolute priority at the moment. We get that, and we're going to need it for years. But don't forget the system as a whole. And I would want to, I guess, commend the RLTP being approved with that material in it as underpinning a submission of that kind. So those are my comments, and I'm sorry if they're not shared around by other members of the table, and we're all entitled to our different views, but those are mine. So thank you to the staff, thank you to everyone around this table, thank you to Councillor Kerr and Marcus who've helped panel beat some of the wording on this on a detailed level. Thank you to all of your contributions as members of this committee to the journey to this point. That's really all I wanted to say, but most of all, thank you to Katrina, Bryce and Mark for all the hard work you're doing for transport in this region. So that was a big ramble, wasn't it? Anyone else who hasn't made any comments want to observe Councillor Price?
I'll keep it a lot shorter. I'd commend you too, Martin, for the way you've chaired it and workshopped it, because I think the workshops have been really well done and makes us get a document like we've got. Bryce, for the work you've done on it, and for meeting with me this week and going through it, I thought it was good. The executive summary, I think, is really good. And I guess from a Napier point of view, we're reliant on all of these out of our city jobs taking place to help our city. I guess the one thing, and I hammer betterment, and the fact that we should never ever be out of touch with Hastings. That's where our hospital is, that's where our police are. And you've got to remember in Gabrielle, Napier actually inherits half the police district because it moves into Napier's area and there's not a lot of resource really for the police. So that's not bad coming from an ex-policeman, is it? So, so I think that's takes place. I think the plan's broad enough to have a bit of movement in it in the areas you're talking about, Martin, which I think is really good. But I think it's a document we should be pretty proud of.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Any other from elected members? Firstly, any other comments? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I had my questions earlier and I didn't actually reiterate the comments that have been made by others, thanking the team for putting the plan together. I think it's really important for Central Hawke's Bay to note that we feel that this is the best Central Hawke's Bay has been represented in our regional land transport plan, albeit draft at the moment. We do think it's important to recognise the BAU and the pre-cyclone damage, as I've already mentioned. You know, we had Cyclone Gabrielle came on the back of $55 million worth of damage, and I think it would be a good chance to mention that funding is all of our number one challenge coming up over the next 3 years and beyond, and we're working hard to advocate central government funding to fund 90% of the remaining cyclone damage. The remaining 5% through rates, and even that's hurting. If we can achieve that, we can fix all our damage in the next 5 to 6 years. If we don't, it's going to take decades. And I like the way the plan covers the resilience, the maintenance, as David said about that it's also replacement in there because some of them are beyond maintenance. So yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that Central Hawke's Bay really feels part of this plan.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'm celebrating that because I know that's been a journey in itself, isn't it? Now, Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, very much resonate with what you have said and summed up. When I started, unfortunately last year I was a little bit off the page. I was mopping up somewhere else, and I wasn't really seeing much at the workshop input. But when I started reading it, I thought, are we going to get there? You know, what we've talked about and that you as chair and I had had discussed. But as I got into it, I really started to feel really good about this. You know, it is there. The word health is used. You know, we actually, I still miss livable cities. You know, because we know that we have towns that actually are increasing their density, and with that will come some real issues, and that's mentioned in here as well, and how we're going to resolve those issues. But overall, as you know, I'm an active transport advocate, and I really see a great way forward with this plan. Let's hope that we are able to, from a national point of view, but also from a financial point of view. So, but at least, you know, we're making plans, and if you don't plan and if you don't dream, you'll never get there. So, thank you very much.
Back. Advisory members, starting with you, Ian, any comment you got on the plan? Or?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone that's been involved. Obviously, it's been a pretty big job and it's come together quite well, or very well.
All right. Where are we? Any of the people on the screen? Nicholas, any comment from Port's point of view?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just a few comments. We said before that the GPS and the RDP seem to be pretty much aligned. One thing I've noticed that the GPS, especially on the rail side, may choose to focus heavily on the Taronga, Hamilton, sort of Auckland part, and may impact how the rest of the line, and so the more regional lines, or the east-west line, as we call it, from Napier to Palmy, the one that's in use for Napier Port, is in use or funded in the future, so that may impact as a consequence, the flexibility, the resilience, and even potentially the number of trucks on the road, depending on what happens with the future of rail on the regional point of view. And then I had some comments on page 68, which I can send to Bryce more about the storage on port. So it's not it's limited storage, but we are actually working on the different projects and on ways to better use land on port to actually increase our storage capacity and make sure it's not a limitation to the region's export for the next 30 years. So we don't just rely on land outside of the port and on connection to the port. We want to make sure that within the gates our storage and efficiency is up to speed with the projected growth of the region and of the other regions connected to Napier Port.
Thank you, Nicholas. It's a good point about the focus on rail in the banana, if you like, from Auckland to Sydney. And that's something that we continue to have to elevate our voice as a region in regional New Zealand to get that attention. I think public transport's sort of falling the same way. Api, is there any further comment you wanted to make at this point? And you're most welcome to.
Yes, I'll just take the point that Bryce talked about the consultation process. And yes, and that's true too. And I suppose what was going on at our hui on that particular day on the 6th of March was where does iwi fit into this? Hence the reason why we want these hui. And we're talking about a workshop and all that, and whether we're out of time or maybe we are, maybe we're not, and so that's where we are with that process. And but I think what's good for them is good for us, and what's good for us is good for everyone. So maybe that's something that that we need to look at anyway. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. Matt.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Bryce, you and your team for writing it. It was great work, and it's great to have health in there as well. It's got a very nice holistic things, as not just about transport from A to B, but covering everything else, and particularly the health, as you talked about, Mr. Chair, about the shocking stats around inactivity and obesity and stuff as well. So really important to have that as well. And I guess with health and the change in the GPS as well, I guess health has a lot of cost benefits as well. There's all those benefits that can be reframed in other ways to fit in within that sort of slightly change in priorities as well. And I guess the issue being around active transport is it sounds a bit like chicken before egg in terms of we know with active transport that's when it's safe people do it, but if there's low volumes not doing it, you can't do the safety work, but you've got to have the safety, it's got to be safe before people do it, so it's a bit of a hard basket to be in, but thanks definitely for all the great work on the health stuff.
Thank you. David.
I'd just like to reiterate the robust plan that we appear to have, and I think it covers all the bases, so thank you again, guys.
Angela.
Thank you. Yeah, on behalf of police, thank you for opportunity to participate in the workshops we've had around State Highway 5 corridor in particular. So I came in partway through the year leading up to this building up. So I appreciate being part of that process. Probably the one thing that stands out is not being included in here, which might not be the right place, but just around the maintenance side of things. Obviously cyclones come and smashed our roads. There was already existing damage, but then we also have the offender element out there that's actually actively out there messing up our roads, so antisocial road users. People like to call them boy racers, but not a very accurate description. But I know they're a complete pain for a lot of people because of the amount of damage it causes to our roads and the cost involved in maintaining. And I can think of one, went to a community meeting at Maraikakahu last week. One intersection has been repainted 5 times at least since Christmas, so the effort involved in doing that work, that maintenance wouldn't be apparent to the public, the cost of that. It's just horrific. You can drive just about any of our rural roads and intersections and see lots of black skid marks after every weekend. So it's a really frustrating thing, which we're focused on it from a death and serious injury kind of angle and enforcement around trying to keep people safe. but I just noticed it's not really represented in the discussion document. It's probably something I should have raised somewhere along the way, but that factor is potentially increasing if you go by the number of reports that we're getting of that kind of behaviour. So yeah, the cost involved in keeping the roads good so that the markings are visible for other road users, clear of debris. So yeah, that's probably an element that's understated.
All right, that's a very good point to have raised, and I think that needs to be noted by the staff in terms of potential content addition through the submission process, perhaps, as to another reason we have maintenance challenges, and it possibly lives within that safety driver behaviour context as well. That could be noted. I think, Councillor Kerr, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A very simple question. If Trek in their rebuilding of our state highways needs to realign a state highway, hypothetically Devil's Elbow, is that funding appropriately included in this 10-year plan?
I think we've got a couple of people willing to answer. I'll start with Linda.
The cyclone rebuild and ongoing recovery funding is a separate fund from Treasury. So it's not included in as the NLTF or the State Highway Improvement Fund.
Yeah, it's the work we take.
Does that answer your question?
It's our recovery.
It does answer the question, but it leaves me fearful that there is a hole.
Well, we're putting in a funding bid for the entire, effectively, Tairāwhiti to Hawke's Bay Resilience Rebuild Program. The details of all of which would be worked through in due course, no doubt, as the PVC evolves and funding's applied. Would that not give scope to deal with that particular part of that corridor?
They are all seeking funding from Treasury as opposed to, or from the Crown, as opposed to through the National Land Transport Fund. So it is a separate source of funding as opposed to being funded through what the RLTP is seeking.
Through you, Chair, that's the work that we'll be taking through the Regional Recovery Agency.
True.
So that is the work that we are looking at in terms of our recovery and rebuild.
All right. Well, thank you. It looks like it'll live in one of those two homes and not fall through a crack, I hope. Hey, well,
For you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councillor Kerr.
Follow-up question, is there any value in having a sentence in our RLTP regarding that?
Would you like to propose that? Perhaps you could send it to Bryce, or we could read it out now.
Probably a bit tricky for me to do it. I would rather pose the question and let somebody within the meeting room shape that if it's appropriate.
Repose the question, please.
Is there value in these large projects that are currently not in our RLTP because they're being funded elsewhere? Is there value in them being placed in our RLTP, even with regard to a sentence? My logic, the Treasury may simply ask, is it in your regional land transport plan? No, why not?
Okay, Katrina.
Linda might be able to help me with this one.
I think Katrina's...
Yeah. Sorry, Chair. I think it's probably a good call out, Councillor Kerr. It would be worthwhile specifically referencing the work that is underway in partnership with or via Trek to note that we've got the business case work. Once the Trek business cases are approved by the board and we're going through the updated SHIP, we can certainly have a look at how we make sure that we've got like cross-reference in much the same way as we've done for the State Highway 5 business cases. So yeah, I think between officers and the NZTA team, we could probably help put a quick sentence together. Well, I think that's probably a fair catch, Councillor Kerr.
My suggestion is that that is recorded as an action for Katrina's team, Linda and Councillor Kerr, to work out what might be included in our plan to draw a bridge between the content of that plan and the Recovery Agency projects to ensure that there isn't a gap, and we address that through a submission to the plan from the staff. All right? Okay, good call, thank you. I'm sorry for kicking this along, but I know everyone's busy, and I'm wondering if we couldn't move to the recommendations in the paper. So we've had questions and comments from everyone, I believe, which are to receive the report. I really don't know why paragraph 2 there is saying it's not significant when we're going up to consultation. Do we need to?
I think it's about the decision to notify for consultation.
Oh, so the decision to notify is not significant. All right, so we don't need to consult on the decision to consult. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. So, forgive my Python-esque diversion there. And then releases the plan for consultation following minor amendments and formatting changes. And we don't need to appoint a hearings panel because that will be us. I'd like to take 4 out, and that we agree that a submission on the GPS, and we're going to need to delegate 2 people for that purpose. There is this issue, there have been 2 or 3 actions coming out of this, and one of those is for a submission to be made by staff to pick up any sweeper issues. And there have been changes tabled by Councillor Taylor, for example, around Plonga Ho, the previous backstory to it, and the vehicle counts. Can I just ask the staff, do we need to have a resolution around those, or would that be covered by following minor amendments and formatting changes? Can we just add the words as discussed at the meeting, including through action items, all right? Okay.
Is that Peter?
Yeah.
Now, the who I would like to be involved in drafting a submission. If there's anyone who, having heard from me about what some of that submission might cover, wishes to take a different position and be involved as well, or entrust that to who else would like to join me on that submission?
Through you, Chair, Councillor Kerr.
I'd like to move Councillor
like to
Kerr as
see
well.
that.
Okay, well, you've got 3 there. You've got first, second and a third. So, okay. On that basis, I move items 1, 2, 3 and 5 with my name and Councillor Kerr in 5 and those additional words as discussed at the meeting, including through action items to 3. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Van Dyke, first with his hand up. All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Carried unanimous. Thank you. That's the main decision item.
Assuming Councillor Kerr, Mr Chair, is okay with that?
She said she was.
Oh, did she? Good.
Yep.
Thank you.
And
I didn't hear that.
No, I saw that.
no, Hazel Hurst proposed this, so, you know.
Yeah,
What's she going to say? What's she going to do?
She went into a black spot at that point and talk about resilient transport connections. All right, well, congratulations, everyone.
Just a point of order, can 2 from the Regional Council move and second the motion?
That's a really good question. I can't see why not. We're both voting members. Do you want to make it safe and...
No, they can't.
I don't think you can.
Fine, we'll change that then. You put,
Happy to second, Mr Chair.
We've got Councillor Taylor as the seconder now. Should I re-put the motion? Okay, I will. So I've moved that Councillor Taylor's seconder. All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? I know certainly 2 from each road controlling authority can't, but So maybe we were special.
I get called out every time by Councillor Price when I do it in Joint Committee for Coastal Hazards.
Been called out by it.
You're the only, through you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman, you're the
Mayor
only
Little.
one with 2 members. We have.
All right. Shall we move on to My Way trial evaluation?
I need to.
Got our way.
That's right, we did too. We did, we got put up. Yes.
Got our way anyway.
Come on, get it right.
Yeah, no.
Start getting good help.
Yeah.
Who is going to speak to that paper?
Yeah, I will. There was a commitment from the regional transport team to conduct a review of the My Way trial. It was a trial that started in June 22 when we put in 3 vans on an on-demand basis, and we took out some fixed run of public transport to do that. So I would take at this point from people that the document has been read. I think probably just to highlight the summary of where the decisions are currently at, or the findings of this trial. We have had an improvement in patronage on that service. But certainly the high level cost of operating that service are higher than anticipated for multiple reasons. One probably notably was the inclusion of the indexation, which is the government imposed the NZTA supported indexation specific for public transport, which was applied to this contract.
Indexation, through you, Chair, sorry, indexation is the transport equivalent of the CPI adjustments. So it takes in the cost of labour and maintenance, and in most recent years has increased up to about 27%.
That was over how many years? That was sort of like a backdated thing.
Yes, since 2016, it's continued to step up, that we're currently over 30.
From the start of contract date, is that correct?
Correct.
So 30% over the course of
since
6 years or thereabout.
That came as a surprise to us last year, didn't it, when that arrived?
It's been a significant concern for the entire country that's dealing with those increases in transport costs, yes.
I think it sort of came out as a chunk rather than every year. And it wasn't within the Reserve Bank remit, unfortunately. Right, so we've got an opportunity for, everyone has read the paper. Thank you, Mark. And also, I'm grateful to have that evaluation. It's a project that's pretty dear to my heart. Any questions on the paper?
Yeah, I've got one. Just in regards to the vehicles being used, I see only one of the 3 is wheelchair accessible. I just wonder if I didn't see it, I might have missed it. So is there a proposal for that to change, or does that remain the same?
Through you, Chair, no, that is proposed to stay the same till the end of the contract. That vehicle was specifically made and increased the cost significantly.
So in other words, this project finishes next July. We're 2 out of 3 years into it, really.
Correct.
And yeah, we were only able to kind of float it at all feasibly with 1 out of 3 being the preferred form of vehicle that we would have liked from the outset. So it was a way we could actually get it going. Those things we needed to take on the chin, unfortunately. It's a good question, though. So, but
Just the reason I raised that, we have had a death mobility scooter in Hastings earlier this year. So yeah, there is a high usage of mobility scooters, and we're doing some stuff ourselves around what do we do around their safety, enabling people to get out and about.
Very good point. Angela? Other questions on the paper before we turn to comments?
It's got a comment and I
Well, let's
can't.
go to comments then.
Sorry. I can't let it go without just voicing the disappointment of Napier not getting its trial. It was a bit of a shame because it would have worked here.
Yeah. Councillor Van Wyk, did you have a
Yeah,
comment?
I've got a comment. I've actually got two. One is that if you compare the outcomes compared to the existing public transport network, was unfortunately very poor analysis, and it's a real pity that we actually cannot have this particular system of bringing people around with a adequate working a public transport system, which we're hoping to have in place in future, because I think what we're looking at here is a certain group of people that actually will be using it and hopefully could have made use of it. The other one is average age of McDonald's users is sort of around about the 26, I understand, and I see McDonald's is being used as a drop-off point. I don't quite get the two together, but anyway.
Sorry, through you, Chair, it's not that it was, McDonald's was a destination, it's about the location and its proximity to destinations that our passengers wanted to get to and come from.
Well, it says
So there's-
McDonald's, so that's how I read it, and everybody else will read it.
Through you, Chair, that's because there was enough capacity on the street there to accommodate the bus to pull in. There's also a supermarket very close nearby.
Through you, Chair, just a question. Can I just say that I know Flaxmere wasn't decided to be included in the trial and in the reasons that, I'm sure are right. But I'm just really interested in who uses a service, a public transport service. And our Flaxmere community now, without any support and services, and your staff were presented at a meeting with 200 people who asked them, could they have a bus service and could they have part of the trial in the My Way service in their village, in their community. And it's in a community of 11,000 people. Now, is there the opportunity, and why wouldn't there be the opportunity to be able to pivot and change a destination to include a community, a vulnerable community that would use a service to town to be able to understand and meet their needs? Can someone explain to me why we couldn't suddenly support a community to have this service as this trial for the next, we've got till July, you said?
Next year.
Next year? So I'm just interested to know why we're so sort of hard and fast about just Hastings and why we couldn't change the route.
So through you, Chair, to begin with, and I'll let Mark speak to the bus services in Flaxmere in just a minute. When we initiated the My Way trial, we had to replace current services that we had in order to afford it in the contract. It wasn't simply we had a contract and we were adding on top of that. We had to supplement the contract with additional funds, but that meant taking services away and replacing them, and that's what we did with the Camberley and those three services that were underutilised. They were the worst performing services we had, and I'm speaking slightly out of turn. It was prior to my employment here, but this is how I understand it. Those services were the most underperforming services. We had very low patronage, and essentially the buses were running at a significant loss compared to the rest of public transport. So it was decided to see if we could generate, and that was despite the fact that this committee and Hawke's Bay Regional Council significantly reduced fares at the same time to try and increase patronage. That did not work. And so they thought that an on-demand service might be worth a trial. That's how the trial came to be. In order to then take that service and make it work, you've got to have frequency, and in order to extend it out to Flaxmere would mean that we would need about 8 vehicles, not 3, in order to get the frequency given the distance, and we couldn't afford that. If we then replace the current on-demand and take it from where it currently is and move it into Flaxmere, It's our contention that in fact Flaxmere would be worse off. They've got incredibly, well no, I'm not going to say, they have got very good bus services now in terms of frequency of buses and reliability, far more so than the 3 services that we removed from Camberley and those areas. So I'm just going to let Mark talk to the bus services that we do have in Flaxmere, because I think there's this view that they are not well serviced. In fact, they are very well serviced with a bus service into and out of Flaxmere.
There is currently 22 services that go right past the Pack and Save, which is what has generated the conversation around with the closing of the supermarket to provide that connection for them. That connection is there. On top of that, there is also a couple of additional school services that we provide as dedicated services out of Flaxmere to Hastings Boys as well. So being honest, the service and the framework is there to provide the connection that has been brought about by the change in the supermarket already with what is in there. We have also, given there was an indication of an opportunity of some funding from somewhere to support that, reached out to GoBus to find out whether there was ability to put additional vans on, because as Katrina alluded to, if we pick some of those up and move them, given that extra distance, we are currently at some peak saturation points now, and that would have been detrimental to the current offering, and those other vehicles are not available for them to provide, and that would obviously come at an additional cost anyway when there's services with capacity now operating a connection directly to the supermarket.
Yeah, I think this is unfinished business myself, and I'll tell you why in a moment, Sandra. Thank you for raising that. Did you want to carry it? Any further questions arising out of that?
I need to understand from our community if they are getting the service that they need, and at this moment, I only know what I heard at that meeting. Yeah. So I can't add anything.
Look, this may be helpful. I'm just going to say this now, and there's quite a bit to it. Public transport in Hawke's Bay is unbelievably challenged. It starts with the fact that we've got 2 twin cities and a relatively low population. It starts with the fact that it's not part of our culture. Then you layer upon that a 10-year contract that we've had, which has made it very difficult for us to manage and be agile and be flexible and respond to cancellations and that sort of thing. Then you add the fact that we've had 27% indexation. Then you add to the fact that as a result of cancelled bus services, the utilisation of our total mobility service increased way beyond budget. Then you add to that that we've had living wage bus driver shortages. We've had a cyclone which closed bridges, put congestion on the expressway, meaning we had to cancel services for that. So you add frustrations on top of that. Then you add to that the fact that as a result of the GPS and the reduced funding, and a decision to end the subsidies or the not continuing of the subsidies that the previous government put in for particularly youth. We've got dramatic price increases coming. You add to the fact that we've only got 3 staff who are trying to run a ship that 8 staff in any other council would do. You add that to the fact that we've got 20% rate increases facing every council in this district. You add to the fact that we're trying to design a new public transport system and leaning on that as our way to drive a low emissions transport system. The timing is terrible in terms of working out what we can actually now afford, and we won't find that out until September, which is halfway through the time frame that we need to go out to contract for our new contract to get a level of service that is actually fit for purpose for your community, Sandra. In other words, we were proposing to deal with this through increased frequency. It is nothing short of a cluster bomb. It is extreme what these guys have been trying to work with. And it's hugely frustrating, but we need to stay on message and on target with it and not give up. I'm convinced that My Way is part of our future. We need the funding support for it though, because our costs have gone up, but our funding commitment from the GPS has gone down across the country, $700 million, and we don't know how that lands in Hawke's Bay until the RLTP bid comes through. And we're caught in the middle of that contractual transition in the meantime. So I think this is the first thing we've done in Hawke's Bay that's increased patronage since about 2016. It's just down the whole way. This is the first thing that's sent it the other direction. I'm heartened by the fact that 70% of respondents thought it was better than the fixed service. But I think we made a fundamental mistake, and it wasn't our fault. And I'm sorry, Linda, but it wasn't. This should be, and the lesson from this trial, I'll get back to my disappointment about Napier 2 in a moment. The lesson from this trial is that My Way, I think, best floats on top of a fixed service, so that in that Flaxmere situation, there are fixed routes, they are regular, but there's a sweeper of, say, 2 roving buses in Hastings and 2 roving buses in Napier that mop up the coverage side of that. And we had the mobile impaired, the people who are challenged in terms of their ability to walk or cycle to a bus stop, whatever it might be. They said, don't you go to a frequency over coverage model without My Way. So it was a mistake, I think, to really thrust this onto our communities by abandoning fixed services that some of it, we're reading the most disadvantaged in our communities, the elderly or whatever, just couldn't cope with the loss of that. That it should be one floating on the top of the other. So let's keep fighting as a region, Hawke's Bay, and that goes back to my comments earlier. Let's not give up on public transport, let's invest in it, but if we're not matched by Wellington, it'll never happen.
Yep.
And that's why this regional land transport plan needs to stay strong on public transport. Our RPT needs to stay strong on public transport. We will get there. So those are my observations, but I share Flaxmere's pain. I do think they're serviced well with fixed routes, but they should equally be able to enjoy the benefits of a My Way service in the future.
Maybe one extra observation, if you allow me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Is that and I totally agree with what you said, and I think it's over the top. It goes together with rather than standalone, because it can never do peak, for instance, peak volume. Is that our majority student body is on a limb in Taradale. Actually, it's not actually in those centres. So that's another reason why public transport is actually struggling.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Happy.
I totally endorse what Katrina has said about the Flaxmere route and the Havelock one also. They're fine. Okay, so you also know that I've done a bit of part-time driving for GoBus, and I was involved with My Way back in 2022, and our day started at 6 in the morning, and we our first phone calls came in around down the end of Murdoch Road. Okay, so this is off the beaten track. Buses don't go down there. Behind Boys High. And the early passengers were the ones going to the hospital. They all had to be at work by 7:15 to start at 7 and all that. And so I would talk to them and say, how did you get there before? And these passengers would say, well, if it was a fine day, we would jump on a bike. But if it was miserable, we would have to either get whānau to take us down or catch a taxi. And I said, well, a taxi, I know a taxi is quite expensive. It would probably cost about $20. And they said they had a deal with the taxi company, and they could get to the hospital for $10. So there we are. It's too cheap. $2 is too cheap for those ones who live off the beaten track. Those who were on the bus routes, that's fine. They can use their B cards, and they deserve a cheap fare into town, and that's fine. But I think all these other fares, the other side round by Girls High, where the buses do not actually go, other than the Napier bus, hey, that's off the beaten track, and they should be paying a bit more. And I think, because I said to one of the passengers one day, I said, so if you were required to pay $5 for my way, would you pay it? And they said, yes, it's still cheaper than $10 if we went on the taxi. So that's one of the problems. I think the fare's too cheap for some passengers who live away from the bus routes. And they're getting a cheap fare, whereas they used to catch a taxi for $10.
I think it's an interesting observation. Any other comments or thoughts on this paper? All right. Well, look, my only one was just to reiterate what Councillor Price says. It's probably the biggest dead rat I've had to swallow in my short time as a councillor, is that we're not going to be able to advance the Napier trial. But I live in hope that it will one day be part of the system across Hawke's Bay, and furthermore, as something for Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa. The community service model, a flexi service, an on-demand, an app-based, all of those technologies with a minibus, and you've got a big impact in some of those communities, so let's not lose sight of it. I'd like to move that we receive the My Way trial evaluation report and note it. Could I have a seconder, please, who's not from the Regional Council? Thank you, Mayor Sandra. Are you allowed to, actually, I'll go for Councillor Price. Could you do that? Because I think, could you please be the seconder?
Because you're the benefit, I'm the benefit.
Yes. All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? All right. The next item is the Regional Transport Program update. Now, who wants to speak to this?
Through you, Chair, I will. I'll largely take the paper as read, but just briefly speak through each one of the work streams, noting, of course, that the start of the year so far has been very busy for TERI. And so at some point in the next few months, we're all going to get together in a room for a half a day and hash out what the next sort of 12 to 18 months looks like as a regional technical advisory group. So just quickly going through each one of the key work streams that we have on there at the moment, noting that, of course, these will change later in the year. Regional Land Transport Plan, we've talked about that today, so of course due to go out for consultation on Monday, and then hearings and deliberations process following that. Regional Speed Management Planning, that has been put on hold, so no further work is being done in that space. RoadSafe, so strategy development is continuing. Once we get past this RLTP, we'll pick that up again with a bit more pace. Liz and the team are currently working towards the Youth Alcohol Expo in the first week of May, and that is a very significant event on the RoadSafe calendar. So that is for years 11 to 13, all high schools right across the region, and the public if they want to come as well. Transport emissions reduction, so the draft transport chapter was presented to this committee at, I can't remember which meeting last year, I think it was May. That was subsequently then built into the overall draft plan that was presented to the Climate Action Joint Committee. So some of the actions from that were to be included in the RLTP, which they are, and then some of the initiatives are moving along in earnest. Active transport, so unfortunately the Planned Transport Choices projects right across the districts who managed to secure funding, they have been placed on hold, and will resume more progress with the regional active transport strategy, probably when we get towards the end of this RLTP process, noting of course that once we actually get the funding allocations and all of that, that'll sort of start to make things work clearer. Regional Public Transport Plan implementation, that's progressing well. We're just working through what the future looks like in terms of network capacity, capability, and all of those sorts of things.
Sorry, Bryce, I have to stop you there. Progressing well. I would like, I've just played the violins around public transport, but I would actually like to give Katrina and Mark the opportunity to upload to this committee now, beyond and in support of anything I've said, or different to it, precisely what headaches you are facing at the moment in terms of getting next year's RPTP delivery underway. Can you perhaps just share some of your...
That I do.
Because I think it's really important that you understand this.
Progressing well is probably a really gross major overstatement.
Sorry.
And I did swallow when he said that, and I thought, yeah. 2 months ago, we found out from Whakatahi that we need to do a 5-stage business case to get an entry into starting to even go out for contract. Nobody had told me that in 3 years of working here at Hawke's Bay Regional Council. It's the first time that Mark and I had been advised. So we are now having to quickly do work on that business case and an investment logic mapping case with an approved person who can do that work. This work normally takes 6 months. We have 2 to get this work done. We have no budget to do it. We have engaged contractors, consultants, and that's going to cost around $200,000, of which we have no funding for. We don't know whether we're going to get funding for our public transport system or not, despite the fact we've got our RPTP adopted by Whakatahi. We don't know that until September. With $0.7 billion being taken out of the public transport budget, it's unlikely. We have an expiring contract at the end of the financial year in 2025. We need to give the new contractor, whoever that might be, a year's notice period to get up and running. That's now impossible. The regional council is, as are all other councils in this region, under significant financial stress, and going out to the ratepayers and asking them to top up public transport is obviously a big dead rat that nobody wants to swallow, but is sitting with the regional council. So to say that our public transport plan and our process on that is progressing well is a significant overstatement, and I'm sorry I do have a quaver in my voice, because actually it is one thing that I probably could cry about, but we keep getting up and we keep trying, because we are really passionate about public transport here at Regional Council. We know it's the right thing to do, and we know that if we do provide reliable service, then our community, who is actually financially struggling, will want to use it. And we've seen that as we've been able to reinstate services with GoBus. I would also add that through all of the financial support that this region has received from the government, both prior and current government, while we appreciate absolutely every single bit of it, not 1 cent was given to public transport for the costs that we incurred through Cyclone Gabriel. It is a headache, it is a financial nightmare, but we will carry on.
So yes, progressing well, trying to work out exactly what we can do within the context and scenarios that Katrina's just outlined. Back to you, Bryce. Thank you.
Thanks, Bryce. Cheers.
Through you, Chair.
Don't sugarcoat the tilt.
That definitely was a bit of an oversell, wasn't it? Maybe I just should have said progressing, perhaps.
You're working hard on it.
Yeah,
We're working incredibly hard.
Things are happening. So that's the end of the work streams, and like I said, it's likely that that TAG program of work will update as the year progresses, and we sort of firm up what the next 12 to 18 months looks like.
Now, do I also understand that we've managed to get all the services back up and running?
Yeah.
After everything that I painted before that led to a less happy picture for some time, which again is a great accolade to the team, but the result of that is that we are facing some fare increases, and on top of that, as I mentioned earlier, the free fares for youth and half fares for not so youth have ended. So just give us a snapshot of what that's going to mean for someone getting on a bus.
Yeah, look, from the 31st of April, the government subsidy, or the Wakote subsidy that was in place for the 5 to 12-year-olds that travelled for free has been withdrawn, and the 50% subsidy for the next age bracket up, which was the 12 through to 18, is being removed as well. So at that point, those fares will reinstate back to their previous level, which was actually $1. Currently, it's $3.50. We have the cheapest transport fares probably in the country currently. So when that subsidy is withdrawn, we are also proposing to increase the fares across the board in the region. Now, we've had some feedback on that around students and the impact to the student activity, which is a significant part of our plan, and we're currently reviewing that to establish whether there is a midpoint or something we can do in there. But if you also take back and reflect, the fares that we're talking about of around $2 and $3 are actually significantly less than what they were 6 years ago when they were $5 something for Zone 2 and $3.70 for Zone 1. So when the region made the decision to reduce the fares, it did absolutely nothing to increase patronage. So as much as there is absolutely a risk of changing that focus and increasing them, we also, as a region, have to get a contribution from that fare. There is also an indication in the GPS that there is an expectation of a greater fare contribution. We're currently just putting together an analysis to see where that looks for our region. I would suggest that's probably going to tap out somewhere around about 14 to 15% contribution. So that means anything that is over and above that is 49% funded by the Regional Council and then 51% funded on top of that by Wakote UNZTA. So as a region, we have a responsibility to try and minimise the impact to the ratepayers by trying to get a balance in that equation between it's no good putting the fares up to a point that nobody uses it, because then we get less contribution than what we've got at the moment. But it would be fair to say our revenue contribution 4 years ago, probably 5 years ago, was 3 times more than it currently is.
Thanks, Mark. So just, and in fairness to the government, it's not that they cancelled a subsidy, it's so that it ended.
Yeah.
So just in very simple terms, the fare from the 1st of May under this proposal for an adult getting on the bus is going to be what?
$3 is Zone 2 and $2 Zone 1.
For one zone, $2, for 2 zones, $3?
Yeah.
And what about, is there an age differential still? Or would it just be a flat fare across all people?
There is age brackets,
yeah.
but essentially the fares will line up, which is why we're going back to reviewing that current age bracket at the moment, and we're just in the process of trying to finalise a step change for those in there.
In other words, whether we could have a cheaper rate for younger people.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. All right. Thank you for that heads up. I thought, again, it's important for everyone to understand what's going on there. So any other comment or discussion on the items in this paper?
Mr. Chair, not necessarily relating to the paper, but it did raise a question in my mind about total mobility. How's that affected?
Anyone want to answer that?
I'm probably trying to understand what your question is around. How does it affect it? It's probably easier to give you a broad view of where total mobility is currently at. Since the increase in subsidy to 75%, our cost associated with supporting total mobility have probably over doubled in that space as well. So there has been a significant uptake in those services, but that has also come at a significant cost from a contribution for council. I do understand NZTA are about to start a review of that whole process, because my understanding is, talking to other councils around the country, they're in a similar vein, that their forecast for the year was used up halfway through the year. So the good news is people are using it. The bad news is it's extremely expensive from a regional perspective to fund it.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the paper be received and noted. Could I have a... Oh, did you have another question?
Yes.
Sorry.
I will second it if you let me ask the question.
You're on. It's a deal.
My question was regards the regional speed management planning.
Yes.
That it's stopped, but can we keep going? What happens to the information that we've done and we've done already?
Through you, Chair. Good question, actually.
Thank you.
My understanding of it is, yes, you as a council can choose to continue if you want. So the interim speed management plans, and I'm going back in my memory banks here, they needed to be in by sometime, I think, in late Q3 last year, focusing on schools and marae. So those will be in council investment programs and should be getting rolled out. If you wanted, as a council, to continue with speed management planning on your roads, you're most welcome to do that. There is no requirement to create a regional speed management plan anymore.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it's a requirement for the regional speed management plan that's been stopped. We can still do it. Is that correct?
Correct. So the regional speed management plan required that each one of the councils would develop their overall sort of 10-year speed management plan that would then get effectively sent to us to stitch together into a regional speed management plan, which we would then consult on. Then that comes back, we provide the feedback to the relevant councils. All of those changes are made in your own councils and through your own decision-making processes, and then would have come back and been adopted and rolled out. So that process in and of itself has stopped, but as far as I'm aware, and Linda may potentially correct me if I am wrong, but if a council chooses to continue with their speed management planning in some way, shape or form, or however they decide, as far as I'm aware, they are able to do that under their own steam.
Yeah, look, I've been wanting to actually ask Linda and give Linda an opportunity to respond to some of the conversation we've had so far. So in addition to answering that question, Linda, can I just say we appreciate the position that the Transport Agency is being placed in, where some of these decisions are taken out of your hands, and you have been a huge supporter of not just My Way, but public transport generally. These haven't been jibes at the Transport Agency personally. It's just the world we're all in. So, Linda, any comment on some of the discussion before and an answer to that question before we break for morning tea? But I need to put that in motion.
I'm going to go with afternoon tea, but yeah. Just re the public transport discussion. To be quite frank with you, I'm a little bit surprised about what I've heard, and that I haven't heard about that until this stage in terms of the process, the stress or the gravity of the pressure that your officers are under, Chair. And I've just checked with my colleague in the room around that. I would just encourage, you know, if it feels that the situation is challenging or unwarranted, the you do raise that with me. That is why I'm here. I did catch up with your chief executive earlier in the week, and none of these matters were raised. So please do. I can't say that I can resolve anything, but I can't resolve anything at all if I don't know. Yeah, I would say we're disappointed about My Way as well, but it was a trial or pilot, and I would really just commend the Regional Council for their leadership on this and the preparedness to give it a try. What we can learn from that and how we take that forward under the new GPS we'll need to work through together. Lastly, on the speed questions, great question. Won't need to go through it in the presentation. Essentially, the Minister had indicated in a letter to all road controlling authorities that they are intending to develop a new rule. That'll be obviously post the 100-day plan, which we're now past. They have encouraged all road controlling authorities to wait until they've developed that new rule. Officers' advice that there's no need to develop a regional speed management plan is correct. All deadlines for all speed management planning have been revoked. Individual road controlling authorities are still able to continue to develop speed management plans or to look at reviewing specific speeds outside schools, maraes, urban areas, and many have continued to do that. So if there are areas of concern or that you have community support to review the speed and look at a safer and appropriate speed, you can still continue to do so. And many certainly have continued with that. So that is up to you. The advice from the Minister is that they will look to write a new rule, and it might be wisest to hold fire on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And I'll take ownership of not having elevated that to your attention sufficiently in advance and taken you by surprise. I thought I had, but I obviously hadn't. And I've been hard to track down. All right, so we've got the motion on the table by me, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Is there any further discussion? All in favour?
Aye.
No? Anyone? Carried. Afternoon tea. Thank you very much. See you soon. Regional Liaison Manager.
Through you, Chair, I have to leave the meeting now.
Well,
to
thank
go
you
to
for taking,
Camberley.
thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule, Mayor Sandra. I know how incredibly stretched you are with the challenges your region's got.
And we'll see Linda. Kia ora, Linda. We'll see you in a couple of weeks when you come to visit.
I'll see you then. Kia ora, Sandra.
She's given me the Hastings vote.
Did I just hear an amalgamation proposal? Beyond our remit, isn't it? Here at Hawke's Bay Council. Okay. All right.
All good, John?
Yep. Susie? New Zealand Transport Agency report from our Regional Relationships Manager. Linda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies, I can't be there in person. I'm over in Taranaki at the moment. We've had the Minister over here all morning, so I just couldn't weave back across the other side quickly enough, so apologies. Could I ask somebody to just move to the first slide for me, please? Thank you. So this slide is clearly out of date from when first provided it. As per the discussion this morning, you'll all be aware that the draft GPS is now out for consultation. Submissions close on the 2nd of April. I would just note that any questions that you might have with regards to the GPS or how to interpret what's in the draft GPS must be directed to the Ministry of Transport. It is a policy document rather than an operational document. So we would ask that any questions that you've got go back to MOT rather than through me or any of the NZTA team. Noting that the timelines are compressed for that, there is an upcoming Local Government New Zealand Zone 3 meeting. I believe that's taking place in Gisborne next week. And I've arranged for our General Manager system leadership along with an MOT representative to be in attendance at that for on the Friday. So if you do have questions about the draft GPS, they can be directed in person to them, and also then the flow-on effects for your draft RLTP and RLTP development. We have one of our general managers there for you too. We are, of course, working on our investment prioritisation, and that we'll have that out for consultation as soon as possible. So we're aiming for that to be out subject to board approval by late March. And we're also as well in a similar position to yourselves in that we're rapidly revising the State Highway Investment Proposal. We'll release that as soon as the revised version has been approved by the board. So that will be sooner rather than later. Just for a bit of clarity on the timeline that we're all working towards, some of your exec teams may have been able to join. We hosted a live call with MOT and also our Chief Executive, Nicole, earlier in the week. We just outlined the early April will be we'll be having the final improvement bids, and any amendments to those will need to be through from both NZTA and all approved organisations. We're aiming to have our indicative allocations for your continuous programmes out by late May, and all RLTPs will be submitted by 1 August. The adoption, therefore, of the overall NLTP for 24-27 will be before 1 September. So that's what we're working towards. If officers have any questions around those timelines, let me know, shoot me a message, and I can confirm them in writing for you. Next slide, please. change of tact altogether, but you'll be aware that there has been some announcements made in the past month or so regarding electric vehicles, and also plug-in hybrid vehicles as well will now be subject to road user charges from 1 April. So as we're all well aware, most people that use our roads have to contribute in some way, shape or form to their upkeep. Most of us pay them at the fuel pump or could be via paid distance like diesel road user charges. To date, electric vehicles have been exempt from these charges, I think going back to about 2009. The exemption was actually put in place until the electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles reached about 2% of the total vehicle fleet in Aotearoa. That has now been reached, and there's over 100,000 electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids on the roads. So the government has decided to end that exemption. So as of 1 April, EV and plug-in hybrid vehicle owners will have to buy a RUC licence and display it as all other vehicles do on their windscreen. From 1 June, I should say, any EV not displaying that RUC licence may well be subject to penalties. So we're communicating directly with EV and plug-in hybrid owners, as well as a bit of a communications and publicity campaign to just raise awareness as we head towards that 1 April date. Next slide, please. And some earlier timed questions kind of covers this off. But just to reiterate, the Minister of Transport did announce that he had made some changes to the Land Transport Rule, the setting of speed limits 2022. That the requirement to develop speed management plans was discretionary now rather than mandatory. The Minister of Transport as well, rather than NZTA, now has the authority to set all and any deadlines for any steps involved in developing or varying speed management. And any previous deadlines that we had communicated to the regional council or to each road controlling authority have been revoked. So any deadlines and targets around speed limits outside of schools, marae, Urapa, also revoked. So we no longer need to meet those previous deadlines and associated with setting speed limits. But plans can still be developed if you feel that's the right thing for your community. You can still continue to do that. So it is discretionary rather than mandatory. And as I noted earlier, the Minister has signalled that they do intend to develop a new speed management rule and have encouraged road controlling authorities to just hang fire and wait for that new rule before further development takes place. Next slide, please. Just bring it into the regional update, just a couple of key ones to note here. The State Highway 5 corridor improvements, just confirming again that that programme business case to develop journey efficiency, resilience, and also to address safety concerns was approved by the board and has been included in the draft State Highway investment proposal for 24 to 34 to seek funding. While, of course, that part's underway, we are as well continuing to work on the longer term rebuild business cases alongside TREC, and just want to thank everybody for their participation in the workshops, which have been quite compressed in their timelines. Just one other note as well, you've probably all driven through it more than I have, but the State Highway 51, the Napier to Hastings safety improvements at Ellison Street Marine Parade to the Waitangi Road have been progressing well. There's been a few changes to methodology as well as the road closures around February, March, just due to some unexpected soils. I guess that's what happens when you're in the midst of construction. But confirming the roundabout's expected to be open and operational by Easter, and we're on track for completion by middle of the year. So the photographs look quite impressive, and the project remains on track to improve the safety at that very busy intersection. Next slide, please. Not too much to update on this one, apart from it's been really good to get those short-term safety improvements underway. The construction started along State Highway 5. They were the short-term immediate safety improvements that we collectively agreed to get underway. There's a little bit more information on those in the detailed pack, but we've got 3 key areas where we're doing work such as improving the curve and road alignment, slow vehicle bay improvements, widening the centre lines and road shoulders, safety barriers, those kind of things. And they're progressing well, started off in January. Next slide, please. And in this one, I think I have to thank you all and your communities for their patience. We know that this work is much needed. We're also acutely aware that it's hugely disruptive, especially when it's across every single road that you are driving on at the moment. A little bit of reassurance that the scheduled maintenance and operations, which was almost 190 sites across Hawke's Bay this year, is on track to achieve 100% completion, which is a really, really solid achievement. But also as well, we have been fortunate that we've sourced additional funding through the Cyclone Emergency Response Fund for State Highways. And that's actually added an additional to our pre-agreed programme, 16 pavement rehabilitations too. So that's been quite short-term and fast work for both us and then working within the communities to get them done within the weather window. But the good news about that is that they are rehabs, so they're not reseals. So that will certainly help us to improve the overall state and quality of the asset and help to protect it as we head towards the wetter months in winter. Next slide, please. I just mentioned the maintenance side of things, but just to give you a bit of visibility as to all of the other work that is happening as well, the recovery work that we've got going on across your state highway network is ongoing and substantial. This table just gives you a bit of an outline of both the number of faults broadly, where they are, and their status too. The aim is to have all of this recovery work completed by the end of June 2025. So you'll see there that we've got quite a bit in train and in progress. Obviously, that's a little bit dependent on what we find under the ground, but as well what happens above in terms of the weather. But if we just jump to the next couple of slides, it just has some images here for you to see the type of work that is underway. Next slide, please. So here we've got some of the extensive work that's happening on State Highway 2, the Devil's Elbow. Those that have driven through there, you'll see quite a substantive amount happening on the culvert that's there. We've got quite a few slips being repaired. The white pine bush has been quite a significant one that's underway. We also have the Waikari Gorge retaining wall bridge repairs. If you jump to the next slide, please. And you'll see here that it's not just State Highway 2. We're working through similar extensive work on 38, 50 and 5. That photo there just shows one of the bridge abutments that's needed immediate remedial work. That's the Mangamati stream bridge, I believe. Next slide, please. And on top of all of this, and I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on the ongoing work that we have underway with TREC. I know many of your officers and some of you have been involved and touched on some of this work, but the rebuild work has been progressing at pace. Just sharing some of Katrina's earlier concerns around business case work. We have a number of these underway and we're doing them in a very, very compressed timeline. And that is to meet, you know, expectations of the community, and rightly so, to get this work happening, but also to meet board and treasury approval processes so that we can get these business cases in and actively be seeking funding for the work. The main aim of these is really to increase and enhance the resilience on our state highway network through Hawke's Bay, Wairoa, and right up through Tairāwhiti, and also to achieve a better overall level of service for your communities. So it's ongoing, and I have popped out, I hope it's made its way to all of those in the room, but certainly to mayors, chairs and chief executives, just around some upcoming community engagement sessions so that your community can begin to get a bit of a feel for what's planned, but also as well, and most importantly, so that we can hear and learn from them and what they're not just wanting, but their local expertise and feedback on some of what is being proposed, as well as the options being presented. So I think that's all from me. Just check there was no more last surprise slides. I think that's it. Happy to take any questions on that, and also you've got a lot more detailed information in that pack. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and just to acknowledge, obviously, the Herculean level of work your agency did for us as a region last year to get us reconnected. But I've never seen so much roadworks as I am feasting my eyes upon at the moment, and it is. You know, while it's an annoyance if you're stuck at a traffic light, it is absolutely fantastic to see the level of effort and investment in what's been, you know, some time. We've been waiting to see that. So it really is, I think, something to celebrate rather than grumble about. So thank you. You can't make omelettes without cracking a couple of eggs. The Waikato Gorge, I keep on getting asked about this. Katrina may be able to help, and you may be able to help. I understand there has been a submission, one submission in opposition, and I'm just wanting to check where that process is at consent-wise and whether the funding is locked in for that.
I can't answer about the anybody that's submitted in opposition to it. In terms of where the project's at, it's been endorsed by the board. It isn't yet funded, so it's not fully funded to proceed through to build. We have not secured the funding for that, but we are continuing at pace on the notification, and as you rightly point out, the consent applications and notice of requirements. So we did get the regional consents, and please officers jump in if I've not quite got it right. They were lodged for the proposed realignment back in May 2023, and then we have continued to work on all of the matters raised through that, and the applications were publicly notified at the beginning of this year, I want to say mid-January, and they were open for submissions right through February. And I believe at the minute we're just working through questions and queries that have come up through that process.
Yeah,
Is that fair, team?
I don't think there are any submissions on the regional ones. I had here from a reporter, in fact, that there were submissions on the district council one. But in terms of the funding, that's not fully funded? When would you know when it is fully funded, and how at risk do you think it is?
I don't think that it's, I mean, the bridge has to be, a permanent solution has to be put in place. I guess it's to what extent and under what time scale does that happen. The estimated costs, I believe, are in the 220 to 270 or 280 million. So once we've got the detailed design, we'll be able to firm up those cost estimates. But yeah, we've just got to sit tight and wait for that funding confirmation, Chair.
So we may not have a funding decision until next year, or?
Gosh, no, I would hope it was much sooner than that.
Okay. Thank you.
She jumped out of the chair.
All right, that's my questions. Any others? A lot going on out there. Well, thank you, Linda, for that comprehensive overview. Very, very busy and challenging times, and will be for some years by the looks of it. I'd just like to then move that we receive that report. Councillor Taylor, could you possibly second that? All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Great. Okay, verbal update, starting with you, Api. Anything you'd like to share with us that you haven't had a chance to share?
I should have said something earlier about, you know, yourself and your Katrina and your team getting over the line for getting the bus drivers' salaries up. And I think that's made a hell of a big difference. I now know that there's too many drivers available, and that'll be the main problem from now on. But and that's why it's back to full operation. So I do commend what you guys have done. So good.
I will take absolutely no credit for that. I'll hand that all back to the team, but thank you, Api, for that.
Just one other thing, Te Waka Kotahi, for the amount of work you guys are doing, Linda. Keep going. Kia kaha mai. Be strong. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Ian.
Yeah, well, like you, Martin, our industry is very impressed with the amount of sealing and stabilisation going on the roads around the country. It's a little bit short-term, probably inconvenient, but for the winter period especially, it's going to give us a lot more resilience, I would hope. Most of the industry is reasonably buoyant at the moment, although there's certain sectors due to overseas economies that have slowed down, like meat and wool and some forestry. But apart from that, this area is certainly very buoyant, with apples, kiwi fruit, grapes and that sort of thing that are in their seasonal peak. Another thing that I thought I'd bring up at this forum, and I don't know how and where we take it to, but being a regional council issue, I thought we'd start from here. Our industry bodies had several inquiries from regional bodies about the height and the amount of metal and silt on the riverbeds. Quite concerned about the resilience going forward. We sort of feel that some of that hasn't aided the last Gabrielle, because the waterways we've only got so much height in stock banks, but we've got a lot of metal building up, especially under bridges. So just wondering whether somehow we can take that to the other part of the council and maybe get an answer at that, or get some sort of idea on the strategy going forward from Hawke's Bay.
Yeah, well, look, that's been raised very frequently and often, including by Councillor Foley, particularly in Central Hawke's Bay. And the answer we consistently get from our asset management team is that the gravel levels are not above what they call the grade line for effective functioning of those conveyance systems. And where they are, we're doing something about it, particularly in the Upper Tukituki. And that has now had a measure of more success than it has recently in terms of being able to let contracts to get, with government funding, a greater level of gravel extraction where it needs to happen than the market on its own, unsubsidised, was willing to do. That's what our engineers are advising us. We're hearing voices from the community that, quite like yours, what you've just shared, see it very differently, but that is an ongoing conversation that's happening within council. So it's definitely a point well worth raising, and I'm glad you did. But don't worry, there are a number of councillors who are on that case fairly consistently. Good, cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Nicholas, Port, what would you like to share with us at the moment that's to celebrate or burning a hole in your wharf?
Oh, we can celebrate. No, just share the good news when there's some. Yes, what we're seeing, and echoing some of the comments earlier, is that the regional economy is doing well. We're in peak season. We definitely seen an increase of activity through the port. Increased number of trucks through the gate, trains being quite full both ways. So I think just a signal of the region recovery. It's definitely been a busy response since for a while. So yeah, we're on track, and it's a good sign for the region.
Thank you, Nicholas. Ed.
Just not too much. Just one thing is one of our junior doctors is working on a sort of information sheet for the community on impacts of transport on health as well. So it'll be available on our website for any interested people or community groups if they're wanting to make submission. It's got some of the science and research behind it as well. They can update themselves or want to use.
Would you or Bridget be able to bring that to our table next meeting?
When's the next meeting?
Good question. I don't know, but it would be in about 3 months' time.
Yeah, that would be
Get
fine.
it past that would be great.
July.
When you're done, just flick it through to perhaps Bryce.
Yep.
And we'll organise a slot, and it could even be part of your, advisory member presentation, or we could have you up on the agenda. Thanks, David. Thank you, Matt.
I was just going to highlight the fact that we've the association's just hosted the annual conference here in Napier and the wider region, and I was very proud to be from this region because it showcased rather well. We prior to the conference, we had the usual meeting of all the 18 district chairs and the CEO and president, and we asked Bryce if he'd like to come along and talk to us, and we stole him for about an hour, I think, of his time, which was very much appreciated. They're interested in recovery, resilience and rebuilding and the challenges, and of course there are other districts, the northern districts, the Bay of Plenty, who are going through similar issues. One of the things that they were very interested in is the definition of resilience, which had been adopted through this committee. And I think it created quite a bit of interest. There was a few came up to you, Bryce, didn't they, and wanted to elaborate a bit and get that shared. The other thing during the course of the conference, we had the minister coming, which we're very thankful for. He spent a lot of time with us. We weren't expecting him to spend long at all, but he was there for most of the afternoon, and gave us the good news about the RONs and 4-lane expressway, which was music to our ears. Talked about the funding challenges, PPP and all those things that are ahead of them. And it was quite interesting how he was floating his preference for RUCs on all vehicles based on weight. So, and moving away from the fuel FEDs, which is basically what we pay at the pump. So that could be something for the future. He was just floating it, but I'm not sure how that's going to pan out.
You mean based on weight rather than kilometres travelled?
Yep. It's a European concept.
Yeah, because it is a better indicator of impact.
So, yeah.
EVs could be badly affected by that.
Yeah, particularly high long distance range ones with the larger batteries.
But it would also pick up on hybrids too. So because your hybrids are quite a bit heavier than normal, I guess. So
interesting.
It's
reason for active transport.
That's right. Bikes are really light, and so are feet. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.
Speaking of fire brigade call-outs, sorry.
All right. That wasn't anything I need to worry about. Okay. Angela, anything else you wanted to share with us?
Just really briefly, I think our strength comes from our connections with each other, and I feel quite connected to people in this room, people not in this room. We work hard with our relationships with Waka Kotahi and the councils Engineers get together, we do have coffee, which we pay for ourselves, just saying.
Just saying.
We shout at each other. My serious crash team for Eastern District work really closely with the territorial authorities around the risks on our roads, so we get ahead of what we think is going to be a contributing factor for DSI in our district, so we work really hard at that. We work really hard at delivering on just our basics, which is RIDS, so restraints, impairment, distraction and speed. And the last report that came out, so sort of December, January, we had pretty good breath screening tests done. We have a bit of a boost, I must say, over the summer period, given the amount of people that come to our district. Our restraints have been up as well. So that's, seat belts, and we're doing a lot of proactive stuff around child restraints with partner agencies and with RoadSafe. The issuing of speed infringements by our police officers is pretty awesome. I think we delivered 20,000 so far this year out of about a 9,000 target for where we're meant to be at, so they're really doing really well with that. So that's actual individual officers stopping, talking to, and they do it on the phone these days, the ticket. But yeah, that's a lot of interactions with people who are speeding. And about 19% of the speed we're giving tickets out for is in that under 11 kilometres over, which we're just trying to get, the average Joe to drop their speed a bit, rather than just targeting higher speed people, just to get everyone to slow down a bit to save lives. So it's all about relationships. That helps us through the cyclone recovery stuff, being really well informed, good communications, just picking up the phone, can talk to anyone about what we're saying, and just really respectful relationships, trying to work through this together. The community that are impacted by cyclone have good relationships with our police force as well. We've got more staff in the rural area that we've had supporting the people there, so they're pretty quick to tell us when things are going wrong, and also the good work that's been done. But just those relationships make everything much easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And again, we know the pressures your organisation's under, time-wise, staff-wise, everything-wise. So you also bring some perspectives to this table that we just simply don't know about our daily travel. So it's greatly appreciated. And please do stay connected with us and keep your voice as part of it. All right. Well, I think that's everyone. And that's the end of our agenda. Just to note that the submissions hearing is for there is that July meeting I was talking about before, but the submissions hearing is in your diaries, hopefully, for the 3rd of May, 9 till 2:30, with a backup day on the 7th. I won't be here in person, so someone else will need to chair the hearing of those submissions.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
But that's, yeah. I just don't think it works to chair like sort of, Captain Kirk from the screen sort of thing. So I will certainly be listening intently. Thank you, everyone. And it's been a very good meeting, a very positive meeting, a big milestone. And let's see what our communities think about moving into the future. Mark?
Yeah, look, just a comment for awareness that GPS submission for anybody that feels strongly around that is actually midday on April the 2nd. So that's the Tuesday straight after Easter. So
okay. Api, would you like to close with a closing karakia to send us safely on our way?
Kia ora Martin, me koutou rā, ka tēnā koutou katoa. Kia pai tō wā whakatā, have a good weekend. Come on the Crusaders. Nā reira, mate atua tātou e manaki e te aki, e rahi rota tōna rangi Māori e tēnei rangi, me ngā rā e heke mai nei. Nā reira kia tau, kia tātou katoa, e ata whai o tō tātou ariki ihu karauti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake.
Āmine.
Kia ora.